Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel. My name's Cypher of Smeg, but you guys can call me Cypher. Now, I know there's a few people who are going to look at the title of this video and already be triggered, and I ask that you please wait. Do not go to that comment section just yet. Allow me to explain, and I assure you it's not going to be as bad as you think it is, although it might still be bad, but we'll see how it goes. I just hope I don't get demonetized. So when I refer to skin color in the 40th millennium, or 30th to 42nd millennium, I'm not referring to anything that has anything to do with race. What we conceptualize as race and skin color and the way they are synonymous with each other these days, it is not the same in the 40th millennium. We have expanded into the galaxy. There's ogrons and ratlings and mutations and all sorts of things that humanity has gone through. The people that are dark skinned in the 40th millennium might be that way because of radiation, they might be that way because of mutation, they may be that way because of a variety of factors, and the same goes with the pale skinned people. So it does not mean, when I say dark skinned, and I can't emphasize this enough, it does not mean the same as it does in real life. Please understand that. So why are we here? Well, I'm here to talk about Space Marine, because I think their law's a little bit broken, or not as accurate as it should be. So, a Space Marine, for those of you that don't know, is a transhuman warrior created to serve the Emperor of Mankind in the 30th to the 42nd millennium. They are taken around 9 to 13 years of age, all male, and depending on your chapter, will depend on what kind of rites and rituals you go through to become a Space Marine. Now, most Space Marines are taken at that age. They're put into a scout company, and then over the next decade or so, they get given different organs. Up to there's 19 organs for the original Space Marines, and up to 21 for Primaris. Once you get the Black Carapace, which is the last organ, you are eligible to become a fully fledged Space Marine and be given your power armor and be officially inducted into the chapter. So, of these 19 organs that you can be that can be inserted in you, that sounds really wrong. You've got things like the Betcher's gland, which allow you to spit acid. There's a second heart. There's a third lung. There's a organ that allows you to switch off half your brain, so you can rest half your brain at a time, so that you're still alert in a combat situation. Basically, there are 19 organs, 21 if you're Primaris. I'm just going to say 19 because the Primaris are kind of irrelevant, so I'm just going to say 19 for the moment. 19 organs that basically turn you into one of the most ultimate warriors of humanity. Now, I say warriors, I do not say soldiers, and there's a reason for that. It's because a Space Marine is meant to be perfection, or as close as you can mass produce to what a human should be. They can eat bark off a tree and it'll give them sustenance. They can eat the brains of their enemy and learn their tactics, or at least to a certain degree. So the point of them is that they are a ultimate warrior dialed up to 11, and this is disregarding their time in a chapter. So they could operate alone in the jungle without power armor and still be one of the most deadly things you've ever seen in your life, or as short as your life might be. And the reason is because all these adaptations give them everything they need to succeed. One of those is the melanochrome gland. I can never say it properly, and it really bugs me. Melanochrome gland. Melanochrome. Now, this gland allows the Space Marine to change the pigment of its skin to protect itself from ultraviolet radiation. Now, for those of you who don't know, ultraviolet radiation is bad radiation that comes from the sun, obviously. The reason people that live around the equator have darker skin is so that they can protect themselves from these bad UV radiations better. When you get further north or further south, where there's less direct sunlight, you need less melanin in your skin to protect you from these radiations. And in fact, one of the reasons why lighter skinned people have light skin is because that allows them to absorb more vitamin D, which is a contributing factor to stronger bones and more healthy bones. So this there is a couple of scientific studies out there that actually claim that darker skinned people struggle in more northern or more the southern areas of the world because they have darker skin and they can't get as much vitamin D in their bodies, so they have to do it through other means, through food, etc. So the reason I bring this up, I'm talking a lot about melanin and talking about skin, is because a space marine is meant to be the peak of humanity, or at least close to it. There's arguments about custodies and etc., but just ignore them for the moment, for the point of this video. A space marine is meant to be the peak of humanity. So they should be ultimately adapted to the optimum level for every environment. If what we read on this is true, then this, which comes from the 8th edition codex, I believe, should allow them to change their pigment. Now, I see nothing in any of the codexes that state that that doesn't happen. This, to me, would imply that the pigment can go up and go down. Now, I have found a contradiction to this, and this comes from the Index Astartes book 1. It came out in like 2006, I believe. It was just before the Heresy all started, the Heresy book series, and it claims that if necessary, set off a chemical reaction to darken the skin to protect it from ultraviolet radiation exposure. Now, that to me implies that it can only go up. So the melanin in the skin can only increase, it can never decrease, or at least it will take as long as losing a tan to decrease. Probably a little bit faster because Space Marines are optimized that way. So I would say it takes at least a day for a Space Marine's skin tone to reduce if it had to activate this gland in order to protect itself. So to me, that would imply that we've got Demetrius Titus here. If he walked into, say, the Sahara Desert, his skin colour would very quickly increase to match that of Chiron's here, in order to protect himself adequately. Although a Space Marine would probably not suffer too much from a little bit of UV radiation, you've got to remember that some of these planets that these Space Marines land on have got an ultimate amount of UV radiation, such as Nocturne, where the salamanders come from. And that's one of the reasons why salamanders have got such dark skin. It's not because their Primarch is necessarily dark, although that's another conversation for another day. So this brings me nicely to my actual point, which is, should Space Marines have pale skin? Now, my argument for this is, if what the Magellan Grand is true, so let's say this example, that the organ releases photochemical skin pigments to protect this against radiation, surely that should work in both ways. Now, the Index Astartes description does counter this, but I personally would think that if you want to optimize a Space Marine, then he should be able to reduce his skin pigmentation as well as increase it, so that they can gain as much nutrients and as much protection as the current planet would deem possible. So, for example, if a character that looked like Chiron landed on Valhalla, which is a planet in the 40th millennium, he should be able to reduce his pigmentation. Well, his skin should naturally reduce his pigmentation to be lighter in order to gain more vitamin D from the sun. And again, going back to the example of Titus, his skin should be able to increase in pigmentation to match that of Chiron, so that he can gain as much protection from the sun as possible. See, nothing about race. It's purely skin pigmentation and purely science. So this is where the rub is. If that's true, why would a Space Marine chapter that has the same genetic lineage have two really skin tones in this picture? My argument is this. Rabute Gulliman has got one of the most purest gene seeds alongside the Lion and I believe Dawn, although there is problems with Dawns. So for a Space Marine to be the optimal he would need to be, they should all have pale skin. Bearing in mind that they spend a lot of time in their armour, a lot like Spartan 117. He is described in the books as having exceptionally pale skin because he spends so much time in his armour. So a Space Marine who spends near enough their entire life in their armour, or in combat at least, should be nearly white pale. Now, there is a little bit of a rub in regards to this because some chapters have different genetic lineages. So, for example, the Sons of Horus, their genetic lineage is to look a lot like when they have the implantation of the gene seed, it alters their body so that they look a lot like Horus. There's even a character in the Horus Heresy called Little Horus because he looks so much like his progenitor. Abaddon the Despoiler, he looks a lot like Horus Lupercal because of the genetic alterations to his body from his gene seed. Same with the salamanders. The salamanders get dark skin. Well, I say this. In fact, I'm questioning this because as far as I know, the salamanders only recruit from Nostromo, from their homeworld. Sorry, I can't remember it at the moment. I'm dyslexic. Words just pop out of my brain. So, does that mean that the salamanders, if salamanders had a successor chapter, which they now do in the Primaris Marines, would they still have dark skin? Because it was the sun of their homeworld that gave the residents of that world the dark skin because it was so high in UV radiation. So their bodies either had to adapt or they mutated to be able to protect themselves. Same with their red eyes. This is an interesting question. I might have to look into this a little bit more. But either way, so the salamanders apparently have a gene flaw that gives them dark skin and red eyes, which may not necessarily be from Vulcan. It might be from their planet. So that's an interesting one to look at. But either way, the Space Wolves, the Sons of Horus, even the Blood Angels to a certain degree, all have genetic traits from their progenitor. So, why do the Ultramarines not have the same alteration? Why does Chiron here look so different from his brothers? Now, there's an obvious reason for this. And the obvious reason for this is the fact that it's Space Marines and it's Games Workshop. Games Workshop want you to create a chapter that reflects you or reflects your imagination. And if you are somebody if you have dark skin, you might want to paint your Space Marines as dark skinned. If you are light skinned, then you want to paint them light skinned. There is nothing wrong with this whatsoever. So that's why Games Workshop opened the door with characters like Chiron, but they don't make sense from the world's perspective. And as I said, the only contradicting piece of evidence that I could find to why the melanochrome it can only increase melan, it can never decrease it. So I think this is and it's interesting actually because in the 5th edition codex there's only 18 organs that are put into a Space Marine. So they actively removed it from the codex in 5th edition, possibly because of this problem. And now I'm going to go on to the actual crux, or the thing that made me question this, and that's the new Space Wolf release, which I'll say are absolutely beautiful. These miniatures, especially Grimnar, are absolutely gorgeous, and this is coming from an obvious Dark Angel player. But as you can see, so Space Wolves, for those who don't know, Space Wolves are a chapter that specifically recruit from a world called Fenris. Now, Fenris is a ice death world, and it's based similar around Norway, that kind of vibe. It's got a very Nordic vibe to it. That's why you've got that's why Space Wolves have a very Vikings in space aesthetic to them. And also it's a very dangerous world, so every advantage one can get will make the difference between whether you live or die. So when it comes to things like your skin color, that literally could be the difference between life and death, which makes it all the more confusing when Games Workshop decide to do things like this. Now, am I saying there was never any dark-skinned Vikings? No. There is evidence to suggest that there were a few. But people with dark skin would not come from Fenris. And now, am I saying you as a Space Wolf player should never have dark-skinned Space Marines? No, I'm not saying that, or you can do what the hell you want with your own chapter. But unfortunately, Space Wolves do come predominantly in one colour. Can there be a couple of exceptions? Yeah, of course they can. You know, they've needed to recruit from a random world just to bolster their numbers when they've been isolated or something along those lines. Yeah, great. There's plenty of lore reasons you can come up with to legitimize multiculturalism in your Space Wolves, but it's difficult to do, especially with the amount of lore around the Space Wolves that insist that they must come from Fenris and there must be certain aspects of Fenrisian culture in their chapter. So anyway, that was my rant, and I'm going to conclude by saying this, right? Warhammer's for everyone. It quite literally is for everyone. If anybody ever tells you you don't belong in the community, then you should tell them to go swivel. It doesn't matter what part of the community you want to be part of, whether you want to be a lore nerd, whether you want to just build the models, if you just want to paint the models, if you just want to play the games. Everybody is welcome here. Warhammer is not about being a nerd. Warhammer is as much about mental health and being part of a community as it is anything else. We accept everybody from all walks of life. So if you've been offended by anything I've said, I apologise, but I've gone out of my way specifically to ensure that I didn't reference anything in the real world. I'm trying to reference the things in the Warhammer 40,000 lore. And it is my opinion, and again, you're more than welcome to argue this, that every single Space Marine, barring the genetic mutations that afflict Vulcan and Corvus Corax, every Space Marine should be, in their armour, pale skinned. And when they step foot onto a desert planet, they should be dark skinned. And when they set foot on Valhalla, their pigment should barely change from that was under their helmet. It should vary. It should go up and down depending on the severity of the radiation that is afflicting them. It should not, in my opinion, be affected from what peoples they were taken from. It should be the process of being a Space Marine should override all of that. Now, should they lose the facial features? No. Should definitely keep the facial features. It should only alter the melanin in their skin. So that's my little comment. Please, if you enjoyed the video, leave me a like, subscribe, If you want to leave a comment, whether it's good or bad, if you want to leave a bit of constructive criticism, and I ask that you please make it constructive, please leave it, and I will hopefully see you again. I intend on doing one of these videos every month or so, at least for the moment, because I've got a full-time job, and I don't intend for this to be my full-time job, but we can only hope, hey. So, and have a good day. Bye bye.